to start with, what has been your experience implementing blended in your classrooms? And maybe share a little bit about what are the differences between what you expected and the reality of the implementation process.
Okay, I'll go. I think what I have in my head is going to come out right. Well, I think the difference between what I expected and what really happened is just the certainty of everything. I think there was a direction that was like, this is the direction we need to go. And then when we started going in that direction, it was, oh no, maybe we need to go in a different direction. And so I think there were just a lot of different things kind of being thrown around, and we were like, oh, well, I thought we were supposed to do this, I thought we were supposed to do that. And I think the expectation of, we all like to see, okay, what do we need to do? Like, what is the exact plan? And I think there's not really an exact plan. And I think that's really hard for all of us who like something tangible. So, I don't know, for me, I was clearly expecting, like, okay, you need to do this, 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 and this, but then that hasn't been created yet. So I think for me, that was probably the biggest, struggle implementing blended learning this semester.
So I think what I heard you say is you would have liked to have had a very specific roadmap.
Yes.
Instead of having to chart the course so much on your own.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least a little more direction and clarification.
We got turned around, end of first 6 weeks. We thought we had the idea of stations down, when it turned out what we were doing was whole group broken into chunks. And so it wasn't really stations. So then it brought up the dialogue, okay, so what is stations? So how does this work? And then blended took more the verbiage of personalization. And then it all started getting a little bit confusing, because then we weren't certain if we were on the right path or not. And you've got a group of 4 perfectionists who are desperate for a model where no model exists yet, because we are the model. And we felt like the more that we kicked around it, we were just muddying everything up. And so for my experience, because I have pre-AP and they're gonna fight for their grades, and they were willing to dig in more and to hang with me when it got a little confusing and when passwords didn't work, or sites, because Wi-Fi here is spotty sometimes, but they would hang with me on it. If there's they did the buy-in to the individualized, personalized work. I found for me, I didn't miss being on stage, but I missed the connections with the kids. I felt like I was doing a lot of lesson designing with the less personal touch than I'm accustomed to. And I've had some kids say, I love knowing what we're doing for the whole week. And I've had other kids say, I miss things the way they used to be, what they're groomed with. The nice thing is the Abydos workshop model, which is our other district initiative, big deal, it does blend them so beautifully, so that I can confer and I can personalize, and there's, it does work well. But I think I've had more success with the personalized part of it because the kids have owned it.
And I think, like, when she mentioned, the pre-AP are more willing to stick with this, because I teach on-level and pre-AP, I can definitely see that. But for the on-level kids, the second that something's not working or something's not particularly right, they're out. They're out and they're touching each other, and who knows what. They're on their phones, and so they get lost really quick. Especially when technology's not working, or Wi-Fi, or they can't get on something on their phone, or whatever it might be. They're easier distracted for sure.
Oh, you want me to talk? I was just thinking earlier that I was excited to try this new approach and be a part of something that could hopefully get kids excited about learning, but it just feels like whatever I try, I just can't get the work in. I feel like I'm not failing, but teaching in inclusion, and having that new experience, it's still requiring a lot of trial and error. So I'm still working with my co-teacher to try to figure out the best way to figure all of that out. And I think that we've hit on the idea that maybe 5 straight days of independent work, with the stations is maybe not the best way to go with the kids, because it's just too long of them working, even though that we're circulating and working with them and talking to them and, and all that, it's just, it may be too long, and it may be too many things for them to keep up with, because, like even this time we did the half sheets for them to try to keep up with everything, and it was just, I think it's maybe just too much for them to try to keep up with. So we're still working, we're still trying to figure out the magic formula. Krista and I were just, I just told her, we've got a problem, you can't just go with the problem, you've gotta go with this, you've gotta come with a solution as well. So anyway, we're still working at it. I mean, the kids seem to like what we did this last week, but it's just not, the work's just not coming in, and it's kind of like in middle school, if you go look in their bag, it'll be in there. So it's just getting that final piece in there. But, I love the idea of it. I love, all that part. I'm like, Julie, I don't miss, being in front of them, being in charge of everything. That's not a problem for me. I'd much rather be sitting next to them, talking to them about everything. So that part of it is very much more comfortable for me.
I do wonder if 150 minutes a week is not a bit of a stretch for this first group of blended. I might like to visit about that a little bit. Not to reduce it, drastically, but just like we've needed some time, perhaps they need some time to adjust to this new classroom way of doing things. But that's just a thought I've had. We haven't discussed anything like that.
Well, and I think, I know all 4 of us, including Adrian, we are still excited that this could really help the kids. We just think that it's just really challenging when they've done something a certain way for 8 years and have really gotten into the routine of this is how things work. And then even in middle school, the accountability piece to prepare them for this isn't quite there.
Sure.
And that's something that I know as English teachers, we've always been those really, really strict on, following the late work policy to the letter. And, it's tough. It's tough enough. It's a tough enough transition for them to go from middle school to high school and realize that when the late policy may not be followed in every classroom in middle school, and then coming to high school and it's this big new environment, and they have all these other new rules, and they have more freedom, even though they have, more rules, they still have more freedom. And then we're giving them, okay, hey, here's your assignments, do them, and then, at your own pace, turn them in. If you need to work with a partner, and they're just like, I think it really is overwhelming for them, especially if it is, 4 or 5 days a week. I just don't think they can wrap their brains around how to manage their own time accordingly, to help them with that.
Well, and even though we thought we had a good plan going into it, when there were technical difficulties and stuff like that,
Threw us all
Like
off.
now that we're in it, like the furniture in this room, tables and desks, because we were thinking stations, individualized work, group, I wish that I had not done this.
Yes, me too.
Now that I've been in it for a while, I wish I had my desks back so I could group.
Me too.
Like the best days are some days when we split all of these desks, and other days when we put them together, depending on what the need is. I regret the setup of my room, but I wouldn't have known that till I was in it.
Yeah.
So now we have all these brand new chairs, and I'm wishing that we could go back. So I'm not sure how that's all going to work, but we didn't know till we got in. The philosophy is solid. The theory behind it is solid. The execution of it, the reality is different than my expectation, which is not uncommon with me.
Okay, so that said, thinking, we're about to wrap up the first semester and be moving to the second semester. We'll have a couple weeks after the break. What do you feel like that could help move you to that next level of implementation. When we think about our blended learning design in Birdville, we have student-centered at the bottom, and our pillars that for focus this year are the flexible instructional groupings, the student agency, and the data. And so if you think about those things, what is it that you need to, what do you think would help you? So you've got some flexible furniture and that kind of thing, which you're kind of questioning now, but what is it that you need that maybe will help you that second semester kind of turn the corner toward data, toward the student agency, toward the flexible instructional groupings? Talk to me a little bit about that, because the focus really is not so much on the structure, but about meeting the individualized needs of the students, that personalized learning piece. So talk to me a little bit about that.
I'll tell you, and I don't mean to interrupt certainly, but the structure is incredibly important to
It
the
is.
personalization.
Sure.
And because our structure is up in the air, the personalization is up in the air,
Yeah.
So-
for us.
Okay, so what do you think, what would that structure look like for you? If you could, because we don't really want to impose a set structure.
Certainly.
That's why we actually landed on, instead of station rotations, we landed on flexible instructional groupings, because that structure could look different from day to day, class to class. So think about it from that, think about what the end goal really is, and it's that personalized learning and meeting the individual needs of the kids, because we know we have kids in 9th grade that might be reading on a 2nd grade level, and we have some kids that are probably reading on a 12th grade or higher level. So we have a big span of kids in our rooms that we've got to address.
Well, I think with that, I think our curriculum needs to change a little bit, but obviously that's not gonna happen, before next semester. Because if we do have someone in here reading on a 2nd grade level, they can't be expected to read Romeo and Juliet and comprehend it, which is in our unit maps, which is what we, something we have to cover. And I think that we have kind of been given a little bit of leniency on, well, you could pull in a different piece to maybe that's a little bit lower, but I still even think that's still kind of cloudy for us, is okay, what can we have them do instead of Romeo and Juliet that might be easier, because there isn't like a list of options, or approved options, I should say. And I don't want to get in trouble for having them read something that like, oh, that wasn't approved, and I think that for me would be helpful, like, hey, here's a whole bunch of different texts or things like that you can use, depending on what level your kids are, rather than everybody has to do this, which isn't personalized at all. And so I think that's something that needs to, maybe be adjusted for the future, which I know it doesn't happen overnight, but I also think that, something that we've kind of figured out over the past couple weeks is that, we're using blended and personalized synonymously when they're completely different. Personalized is, like you just said, the end goal, and blended is an avenue to get there. And I think that's something that all of us were really confused with, because everything was kind of mentioned as it was being used the same.
If I understood, Texas Tech's course does not use blended and personalized synonymously.
There are two different things according to the class that we're
Sure.
taking at Texas Tech. And their focus is strictly on personalized, and they haven't even talked about blended. And everything's personalized, based on data and things like that. And which was just why I came to the conclusion that blended is the avenue to get to personalized.
And you're exactly right,
Yeah.
it is. So when we started the academy in the summer, I think that first day, we had that personalized learning continuum, and it was like, look at this, let's just think about this. It was a rubric, and, at any of those different places on the rubric, you might be at a higher place or a lower place, but just thinking about that as a continuum, and this is where we're striving to go to get. Do you ever get there? No, probably not. And then it had that line at the bottom of blended learning, and it's exactly as you said, Jana. Blended just offers a vehicle to get to that, because what we knew is that you could not achieve personalized learning by doing whole class instruction model, as has always been traditionally in most high school classrooms. So this is our first attempt to get to that, and so we felt like to get to personalized learning, you had to have some, take blended, well, what are the particulars in blended, so we needed the data, we needed the student agency, we needed to have some flexibility in the instructional grouping. So what else do we need, or how can we make those pillars a little more clearly defined, or what support do you need in implementing those? Might be a continuation of this conversation.
I think for me, structure and organization go hand in hand. One thing that I know I do well is organization, so that it's really clear to the kids, here's where we are, here's where we're going, these kind of things. I honestly sometimes am at a loss, probably for the first time in my teaching career, on organizing this machine. And there's no model to look at, you know, because we're building the structure. And I feel like I open a door and I try to go through and that doesn't work, so I close that door and I open this door and I try to go and that doesn't work. And I've never gone back to the whole group instruction unless there was a reason for it, like it's a brand new concept to all freshmen, it's never been introduced before. Or it's a common problem, let's take some time and address this common issue in your work. When I think about personalizing the work, I'm not quite sure how to get there, and I've read Catlin Tucker, I've gone back, I've read her blog, I've looked at her book, I've looked at everybody's stuff. I mean, there's not a stone I've not looked at, you know, and peered under to try to figure this out. I am not sure how to get to the personalized point and manage that, because I have kids, like you said, reading on a college level. At the same time, I have kids who are, you know, struggling with a third grade material, and they're in pre-AP. So as a teacher, I know how to differentiate and I know how to do the rigor piece, but to keep all those plates spinning on the sticks for these kids and to track that and to know that I'm meeting their needs through the TEKS, because there's so many, I'm not sure how to do that, and I haven't been able to find that answer. And if you go out and you hunt blended or personalized, there's just not much out there yet. And so, you know, that's something that I need as a support, is organizationally thinking. You know, not just here are your assignments, okay, go do them, but how am I tracking for him and for her, and making sure everybody legitimately gets the TEKS that they need to be ready for the test in spring.
And it's really overwhelming when we have 130 children. You know, it's not like we have a class of 25, you know, or even just one class of 30. You know, that would be way easier to manage, you know.
Boy,
when
I
we
would
have
love a co-teacher again.
Yeah. I mean, when we have a class of, you know, when we have
It's still
130.
overwhelming.
Yeah. It's just
So.
the amount of everything is